motor vessel Islander is an old lady for a ship. She was built in Baltimore in 1950. She has been making this trip from mainland to Martha's Vineyard Island for more than 40 years, well over 100,000 trips. She has been around so long and has been so reliable and even heroic that islanders and visitors and the crews who sail her have come to love her, even though she isn't pretty. You are watching her last run before a well-deserved rest and major overhaul. She is under the command of Captain Tom Manley.
The company has a good feel for what the public needs, and they stay on top of it pretty much. Since I've been here in 1977, I've seen increases in ferry schedules so that we're running 18 hours a day for the majority of the year, and most people are happy. Personally, I like the Alcatina, the Islander, some of the older boats. This boat's always been good to me. I like this boat. And she shakes, and she's a little bit slower than anything else we've got, but from what I understand, there's people that only make reservations for this boat.
Lots of people praise Islander, but her chief engineer, Steve Broderick, is devoted to her.
This is I'd be prejudiced to say this because I have been here a long time, but I would say that this is the best boat they own. When you look at the construction on this run, I mean, it doesn't compare. If you had to run to Nantucket with it, but to run to Martha's Vineyard and to run back to Woods Hole, I don't care how fast or how powerful or how sleek the other boats are. When you come over the hill in Woods Hole and you see this thing sitting in the slip, you know you're going home to sleep in your own bed. This boat, because it doesn't have to turn around when it gets to the other port, you engage the power, you head it out, you steer out of Woods Hole, you go to the vineyard. It is an ugly duckling. It does look like a bread box, but I think this is as nice a boat. If you could see it out of the water, it is just like a little whale. This is a very nice boat, and I think the company has been served well by this boat. It's taught me a lot, and it's been good to me.
No one would argue with Chief Broderick, but the Islander is past 40 and she needs a lot of work. New engines, for one thing. Is she worth it? Should she be sold, traded, replaced, or rebuilt? For very practical reasons, the Woods Hole, Martha's Vineyard, and Nantucket Steamship Authority decided the Islander is so sound that it makes sense to do major work on her and to do it with the authority's own people right at her home slip in Woods Hole.
They made it in there without me again.
George, you got that cartoon that Kostiniak drew of the piston coming flying out?
No.
That remember used to be on the generator?
No, I know. I haven't.
It was down the engine room for years. And it said, George, your wife's on the phone, and the piston's flying through the air. Tell her I got a headache.
I had a lot of those. She used to crack cylinder heads. too. We found out what was wrong with it. It was never, you go down in the morning, everything was cold. You start the engine up, and of course you have all hell of fire in the combustion chambers. You got cold water on the other side of the cast iron, and cold water on the side of the piston. And that stuff is trying to, one side is trying to expand, and the other side, we don't want to. And it would crack. And we lost, I don't know how many cylinder heads we lost that way. Finally, we put heaters in there. Heated the oil and heated the water in order to keep it hot all night.
Ray Schaefer, head of engineering, he knew from the start that this was not an easy job.
On any ship project like this, and especially an older ship like this, you run into problems immediately and continually. And with the Islander in the first phase, it was the asbestos that we didn't know was there. We knew we had some, but we run into extensive asbestos. So that automatically would have been a big slowdown and a moneymaker for the shipyard.
I really
think before we got into the second stage of this, we had no choice but to rehab her. By the time we could have gotten something else on the line to replace her, she would have failed big time with us. We had reduction gear problems, we had big time main engine problems, steering, we couldn't get parts for her.
For such major work, the authority decided to call on naval architect Jim Swindler.
Over the next 3 months, basically what's going to happen is we're going to remove the old engines that are presently installed in the vessel, along with the reduction gears. And in addition to that, we're also going to be replacing the steering with a more modern steering apparatus. The events as they'll take place, we'll begin to disconnect the engines next week from the beds and also the reduction gears, and get the steering going at the same time. We expect to have a crane, hopefully by mid-February, to lift the engines out of the boat. And at that point in time, once the engines are out of the engine room, we'll be modifying the engine bed to accept the new engines. Then again, hopefully about a month later, we'll be ready to bring the crane back again and install the new engines and reduction gears, and at the same time the steering is going to be going on, the work on the steering.
The point is we don't have the option to go out to these various peoples with our tight schedules, and because of the talent we have built in here, it's smart to utilize it, because a lot of them we're going to be paying anyway. And another great advantage to doing it in-house, you have the crews doing a lot of the work.
We're just cutting out a hole so we can pull the main engines out.
How big a hole?
The new engines are 5 foot wide, so we're cutting a 6 foot wide hole in the deck to pull the engines up through with a crane. The crane will be picking from the parking lot, send a cable down through the overhead, and pick out of the engine room.
These engines have been in over 20 years. They've got hundreds of thousands of hours on them. We rebuild them every year, but some of the parts are really becoming not available for rebuild, and we figured that where the authority is planning on keeping the boat at least 10 more years, it's over 40 now, it'll be up into its 50s, that by repowering it now we should get 10 good years of service out of the engines. And the engines, I'm sure if they sold the boat in 10 years, the engines would come out and go into another boat, because they're very expensive. And they're factory rebuilt. They're being rebuilt for us in North Carolina, and it's going to be nice. New reduction gears as well.
All right, buddy, cable down. Cable down. Wow, that's scary.
These engines have done all they can do for anybody. I imagine if somebody had a similar engine and needed parts, it would be great to buy them from us, because we have more parts than most people for these. But as far as the authority is concerned, a boat only makes money when it runs. And we're getting to the point where these engines, you wouldn't want to count too much on getting too many more years out of them. If you're going to keep the boat 10 more years, these engines here would not survive 10 more years. So you might as well buy yourself, take it out over the life of the boat, and then the new engines aren't that expensive.
A little more, bud stuff. Big strain.
Vineyard Sound is only a few miles across, but it can behave like the open sea at times. It also gets busy, and there are tricky channels that get even trickier in heavy weather, as Captain Manley will tell you.
Going back to 54 Hurricane is a picture of it almost going up above the dock. One of the senior captains who was from the Vineyard, Captain Smith, actually had them let the boat go and decided to ride it out. And then there was the incident in Oak Bluffs where the low tide, the vessel leaving Oak Bluffs Harbor hit the rock and put a slice in it, and she was out of action for a while. Close, yeah, it took a lot of water. It took a consolidated effort of Vineyard firefighters, the volunteer firefighters, to get the pumps down here and keep her afloat most of the night.
They almost lost the Islander in 1980 when she hit that rock off Oak Bluffs. As she took on water, the captain managed to get her back into the slip and get the passengers off. Oak Bluffs Fire Chief Nelson Amaral was in the brigade of Vineyarders who came to the Islanders' rescue.
We put 2 trucks on the dock, and we ran 2 lines into the bilge of the Islander, and in a matter of less than a half an hour, we had her floating. Before the Coast Guard showed up, we were floating. And the town carpenter built the ramp, and we offloaded the vehicles. The Coast Guard said they no longer needed us, which was quite a joke, and all of a sudden the boat was on the bottom again. So we started our pumps up again, and we pumped just about everything from gas tank covers to filters, parts from the Coast Guard pumps, and in a matter of another half hour, we had her floating, and the divers from the mainland came over and put a tarp around the bottom, and we stayed right through until the next morning. The Islander was just part of the island, and part of every one of us that were there. And we're volunteer, the whole department is volunteered, all the islanders volunteer. And the minute they heard the Islander was sinking, it was almost as somebody put a shotgun to them and told them, get there. So it's part of Martha's Vineyard. And I think that's the way the island people are anyway. They just love their island and everything that goes with it.
Master craftsmen are uncovering problems as they get deeper into Islanders' innards. It helps in work on this scale to have a naval architect on the job.
Yes, we planned on using original engine bed back from the first engine they installed on the Islander. When they installed engines the second time, they used this bottom half of the original engine as a mount or a bed for the engines, and we'd planned on using it on this installation, but it didn't work out when it was a cast bed, and when we got in, planned on cutting and so forth, it wasn't working out, so we had to lift all that out of here, and I think there was about 10 ton of that, and then we had to come up with a new design for an engine bed, and that's what you see here now. It slowed us up some, but we had other things we could do, and it took us about a week to recover from that, but that isn't too bad considering the scope of the job.
Architects design and make plans, and then you need someone to make what's on the paper. You turn to people like master welder Donald Clue.
Jim designed that foundation, and I was asked to come down here and put it together. The only problem was that we had a print to work off, of course, but almost every piece had to be individually cut to fit because it's an older boat. You know, you're not building new. And to fit what's existing, every piece had to be made almost individually. So it's kind of a time-consuming, to get everything to line up just so that the end result is a bed that everything fits on properly. We put in 8 12-hour days in 2 weeks.
The overhaul of the steering system is another major project undertaken as the engine replacement continues.
Basically what's happened is that's what's left of the rudder right there. And that's going to have a new hydraulic steering system on it, which will replace most of this. There used to be cable and electric.
I see the cable marks.
Yeah, well, that's going to be cut down. There's going to be hydraulically actuated steering, and when the boat's old. That was old when it was put in. It's worked very well all these years, but this is the time to make it right. So we're going to go to an electric hydraulic steering system.
In addition to the major overhaul of engines and steering, there is housekeeping, the routine work of cleaning and painting that must be done to be ready for that summer schedule. One of the reasons everyone loves the Islander is that she works hard and she's got to be ready. But now, the main event, the new engines. Well, not quite new. The Steamship Authority found the best deal in 2 huge V8s rebuilt by General Motors in North Carolina. The crew refers to them as EMDs.
At the time, when you're thinking about keeping the Islander maybe for 10 years, I was thinking cost, and so forth. So as we invited these people in to talk to us, they started knocking the other manufacturer's product and so forth. So I got educated in a hurry, and I did a couple of changes of mind, but I made the right decision by buying these EMDs. We spent more money for them, but it wasn't by accident that we made this decision. If you watch the Islander come in, she comes in into the current at full speed, turns into the pier at full speed, flank ahead. So she backs down immediately, and it better be there. And these EMDs are there. They got the low-end torque, the reserve horsepower, and so forth. It was something over 600,000 for the 2 engines, and this is remanufactured. And I think that's important because I was concerned that when I went to the members to get these remanufactured engines, they would remember that Nantucket cost us $250,000 or more to straighten out, and all the grief we went through with them. But if this is handled right and you bid it right, award it to the right people, and we had American Bureau of Shipping ABS certification of them. They watched the construction, and during the construction period, we sent the port engineer down to see them, and we have 2 ace diesel mechanics, and I sent each of them down one day to watch critical stages of the testing and so forth. So it's a good perk, a morale booster, and plus it educates them. Well, it costs a little more for rebuilt EMDs, which are as good as new if you watch what you're doing. When we had these built, we spec'd them with stronger warranty than a new engine. We got a 5-year parts and labor warranty on these engines, and that shows the confidence in the manufacturer that they'll do that. And I have full confidence that we won't need to use the warranty in these items.
It has been true for centuries that if you go to sea, sooner or later they'll put a paintbrush in your hand. The Islanders' lunchroom has become a paint store.
Okay to get through?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
No matter how well or badly the major surgery was going down below, the painter's work was never done. Above decks, the facelift continued. If they had not perfectly aligned the engines, the reduction gears, and the propulsion shafts, Islander would rattle and groan. And so machinist Mark Glavin takes charge of the precision tuning, working to tolerances of 10,000th of an inch. When all the work is done, any mechanic wonders, will it work? Will it work well? The crew tests all Islanders' functions to be ready for the Coast Guard inspection. Then it is time to fire up, cast off, and try her out at sea.
Bridge. 3, 4, 5, 1. All right.
And I think, I know that in a number of ways the Islander's a better ship than it was when it was delivered, because the main propulsion system is better, the steering system is better, we got all modern new electronics on it, we got a new gyro compass, and the decision to rehab it or restore it was quite popular because it's so beloved, and I think it was a sound business decision too. With a total output of $2.3 million, I think we probably got ourselves a capital ship here that's probably worth an area of $5 or $6 million. So I think it was a good investment.
The compass is probably fine. Is fine, but the ship has different magnetic signature. It's a big magnet. It's a big piece of steel. So we got all these little magnets in here to compensate for the magnetic activity aboard the ship.
Can't hold it. Bridge. All right. Now go up. I'll put a full head. All right. There we go.
So the job was well done. They saved a ton of money. The company was well served by repowering the boat, but I think the company probably learned a lot of things about, I know I did, about the management of labor. Because we were very fortunate and lucky to be able to get this boat back on the run. It was the biggest job they'd ever done, and they never should have done it backed up against the summer schedule, because it didn't give them any leeway for error.
Hey Joe, then we got a broom or something to hoist up? They got the broom in the lunch counter. All right. It's a very old tradition. Okay. Put it up on the mast.
We have that all ready now, or?
Put it up now, yeah.
Okay.
Sea trials are a great success. She is smoother than she ever was. Her crew and the Steamship Authority have every right to feel pleased with themselves for having successfully completed their biggest overhaul job ever. They and the Islander must now go back to work. For the past 42 years, she has been bringing people together, sustaining life on Martha's Vineyard, and she looks and feels good enough for 42 more.